Good afternoon, welcome again to wonderful Vienna, where we are here with Encod for the 57th session of the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs. The high-level segment is over, it was the last 2 days. We have two new guests here in our makeshift studio in the Pyramid Event Hotel in Vienna. Here's Michael Kravitz, here's Dale Gieringer. Let me just start by maybe you telling a bit about yourself and the organization that you work for.
Yeah. Sure. I'm Michael Kravitz. I'm Executive Director of Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access. We're based in Virginia, USA, and we work with veterans across the country. We protect the we protect and defend the doctor-patient relationship. That's what we do. We feel that no one, veteran or otherwise, should ever be punished for merely going into the doctor and speaking the things that they need to say in order for the doctor to effectively treat them. That should never be the subject of punishment. And the main issue that we've been working on is medical cannabis. But we will help any veteran that has a medicinal access issue of any kind. Just really medical marijuana is one of the biggest issues for veterans.
Okay, thank you. And Dale?
Yes, I'm with the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, which is really the oldest marijuana legalization group in the world, I believe. It was founded in 1970. I specifically am the director of California's chapter, and we, in fact, sponsored the first ever marijuana legalization initiative in 1972.
This was Alaska, maybe, or?
This was in California in 1972. The California Marijuana Initiative was the first time it was ever put on the ballot. And even though it lost, it did much better than expected and led the state to at least decriminalize possession of less than 1 ounce, or 28 grams. That was in 1976 that happened.
Really? It's the same year as the Holland decriminalization.
And since then, we've sponsored the Medical Marijuana Initiative, the first one in the world, again in California, which was successful in 1996, Proposition 215, and we continue to work on moving California to total adult use legalization as in Colorado or Washington, and that will happen, we believe, in 2016.
Okay. So this is interesting. People outside the US, they might not understand this because they know California is really always been the front runner in America for the cannabis issue. So how is it possible that Colorado and Washington State beat you to it?
Well, they're smaller states, and it's a lot cheaper to do a ballot initiative in a smaller state. Plus, California tried to jump the gun and went a little bit in advance of public opinion by trying to legalize in 2010. And not a step that I personally thought I supported, but it was a bad election to do it. It was a very conservative election, so we lost in 2010 in California, but came so close that it inspired Colorado and Washington to proceed. So we're ready to go to battle in 2016, but it is a major effort, and so to get the funding together and all sorts of things like that.
Because it has to do with the amount of signatures you need to get it on the ballot. How much is this for California?
Well,
we're talking how many people?
You need 500,000 valid signatures, which means you have to collect 750,000 signatures, which usually costs $2 million right there. And then you have the campaign after that. So it's an expensive proposition.
Okay, I understand. So let's get back to Vienna. It's not your first time, I think, here. What has been
first time? Not first time in Vienna, but I think it's your first Commission on Narcotic Drugs meetings.
Right.
And for you?
I can't even remember how many Commission on Narcotic Drugs meetings I've been in. I started working on the international issues actually in Holland. I came to meet up with Chris Conrad and it was Chris Conrad and what's his name now? I'm thinking Ann's kid and McCormick, Todd McCormick, and
of course.
and it was the Drugs Peace House. And I also joined up with Green Prisoners Amsterdam.
But Hank Ponson.
Yeah, and we were working on that time. It was trying to fight the extradition of Les and Cheryl Moore.
I remember this.
Who were facing, forever for a little, what was the same amount as the guys brought to The Hague in a little tray of plants to protest. Remember, they had all the cannabis plants. I wasn't there for that, but I was there for fighting for Les and Cheryl Moore. And what happened was when I came home, the internet was kind of this new thing, and I had this international thought. So I started looking internationally instead of maybe nationally, and I found the treaties, the Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. And that intrigued me, and I read a lot. And the more I read, the more it intrigued me, and I read more. I found one detail that was very important in the United States Constitution that said that once a treaty was ratified by the United States, according to our Constitution, it becomes the supreme law of the land.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden I was like a dog on a bone.
Yeah.
And from that point on, I've been working on this. I had the idea that we should have a greater presence, we being the drug policy reform movement.
At the UN.
At the UN. And already I was working on a project called Veterans for Compassion. It is the predecessor to this project. And the idea was to protect the basic human right to access the medicine that you require. Now we've signed, everyone has signed on to the Charter of the UN, and everybody has signed on to the basic standards of human rights and the International Declaration of Human Rights, which classifies access to medical care as a basic human right. And we're like, why don't you consider medicine a basic human right when medical care is considered a basic human right? So we presented in 1998 in the United Nations General Assembly Special Session on Drugs in New York.
Wow.
And I'm one of the very few around that was at all three UN gases, the last three. And so by the time of beyond 2008, we had a strong kind of roster of NGOs in the United States ready to come to the table. And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, I can imagine that, and this year you could see it especially. And I remember even Fedotov saying that the NGOs are the unsung heroes of the drug policy making and all
Very
this.
Very powerful.
Yeah, so this is, but you get some people that are really quite optimistic and energized by this event, and they really think, well, with the Latin American countries, now we're almost there. Doug Fine is one of the people who says, well, the drug war is over. You might not see it, but it's over.
And then China comes to the table.
Well, Sweden or Japan, you can call these countries, but for you, and I'll ask this question to you as well, what's your impression? Are you very optimistic after this high-level segment, or do you still think the road is long, the road ahead?
I look back as much as I look forward, and I think that when you look back, it becomes clear what this road is. When I came in 1998, the big decision process at the UN was, do we use just supply reduction as our main platform, or do we add demand reduction? And in 2008, it was, do we have demand and supply reduction, or do we consider this new idea harm reduction? And now in 2016, which we're already looking at 2016, I don't know that we're actually even here right now. I think everyone's head is actually in 2016. And in 2016, harm reduction is already a done deal. Now it's, do we regulate and do we end the prohibition of non-medical use? So if you can't see movement there, but I always tell people it's like watching a snail crawl. It's very hard to watch. If you leave for a while and come back, it's clear progress.
Okay.
Yes.
That's a nice image. But what are your thoughts?
I'm encouraged by the rhetoric I hear. It's been very much health-oriented. We want to protect people's health. We want to protect the children. We want to protect the users. And speaker after speaker has said, and we recognize that criminalization of users is not in the interests of health. It's been condemned by almost all of the delegations that matter. Singapore sort of made a point of saying we don't really want to have healthy drug users. We want to just not have drug users in Singapore.
What an argument.
Yeah, really.
But even our own director our acting director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, Michael Botticelli, was here, and he was discussing, how decriminalization has been going on. In fact, in the United States, we just had some major reforms of the mandatory minimum laws that had very long required sentences for minor drug crimes. Those are being revised, and he was bragging about it. So I like the rhetoric. I'm sure that they will not be ready to amend any treaties in 2016, but maybe the next go around it will be a live issue.
Okay.
And I think also the World Health Organization It's intriguing that Japan and Azerbaijan, a few CNDs back, brought the attention of the Commission on Narcotic Drugs to this terrible high-potency cannabis seeds. That's their words, high-potency cannabis seeds.
Don't eat them, don't smoke them.
That their children were getting on the internet and growing, and it was a big
like
problem.
Too,
right? And they prompted the Commission on Narcotic Drugs to pass a resolution to look into this. And now the UN doesn't do seeds, they do cannabis. So they sent off a request to the World Health Organization to do a review, but then they wouldn't fund it. And as I understand it now, the review is going to be in 2018. So this is lining up quite interestingly. If we have a good debate, a healthy debate in 2016 on regulation, on ending the non-medical prohibition of non-medical use, and then in 2018 we have a fair assessment of all these fantastic things we learned about the endogenous cannabinoid receptor system and
the
CBD
knowledge will be even,
and all these things that we know that the world is just finding out on CNN, as we were talking about. I think that there might just be a nice lineup of events. And on the radio last night, I was with Larry Love in the medical marijuana radio. I'll make a plug for him in New Mexico. And I was talking about it, and really for the first time, I was looking at this very strategically, comparing it to the United States. And now that we have a couple of states that have legalized marijuana, we have many states that have medical marijuana. There's two different ways I see this going at the UN. We could go the way of the United States, where several countries do this, several countries do that, and you keep going that way, building more and more. Or the UN itself could change. I mean, if we have enough of a debate, a healthy debate, and then a good positive World Health Organization report, and then more dialogue, and more, maybe the treaties could be changed, and that would cascade the change through 190 countries. So, but one way or the other, I think change is underfoot.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that Fedotov himself said the conventions are not a straitjacket, and pretty much said it's up to the states themselves if they think.
Absolutely.
And it's also
interesting. To the contrary of what the International Narcotics Control Board has been saying.
Exactly.
I do think that the position of the United States is key to this, and if the United States were to suddenly decide that the treaties needed some fixing, instantly that would be on the agenda, and that would happen because this whole treaty was in many ways precipitated by the United States as a pretext for us to be able to constitutionally have the drug laws that we have inside the United States, since they really stretched beyond the normal powers of traditional constitutional powers of the government. So it was thought back in 1961 by our Commissioner of Narcotics at the time, Harry Anslinger, that a treaty would be very valuable to strengthen the constitutionality of this whole thing in the United States.
And it's, of course, because of that, because the United States has been the champion of this treaty, and because of the fact that the world, seeing the United States as a champion in this treaty, has made the mistake of thinking that the bulk of the people in the United States supported that. Now that you see legalization in Washington State, now that you see legalization in Colorado, the cat's out of the bag, as they say in the United States. People around the world know that the people inside the United States contradict what the government is saying. And that, I think, has really had a very opening effect on other countries. Maybe Uruguay felt a little bit more bold in doing what they said. They've certainly maintained the entire time that they have a very strong relationship with the United States. It's never wavered, that they have a strong commitment to upholding and adhering to the treaties. I love what also in that same breath that Director Fedotov said about, yes, we got a letter, a statement from Uruguay, and they think they're inside the treaty. I like the way he said that.
That's very funny. Okay, last question, then we're going to round up. You both are like veteran cannabis activists, very experienced. You've been in this struggle a long time. There might well be quite some younger cannabis activists looking and wanting to learn from you. If you have one advice, how to be efficient, how to get things done, how to be a successful cannabis activist, but what would be your advice? If we
start on that,
No, because it depends. All politics is local, and you have to begin with what is happening in your city, in your state, in your country, and find a way to get involved there. The opportunities just vary from country to country and city to city and so forth, but everybody has a different tactic depending on what they can do locally. Act locally, but think globally.
There you go.
No,
that's
good advice,
the saying. And all I would say is that I think the common misconception is that big groups of people, big functions, big organizations get things done. And you know, Margaret Mead, the famous quote of the great anthropologist who was on our side because she understood the facts, said that never doubt that a small number of people can change the world, because that's all that ever does. And I would definitely encourage those out there to think very open-mindedly about things. You know, don't be afraid to write to your senator, to your House representatives. You know, write letters to the editor. Talk to your family and friends. I mean, these things may seem small, but there are no small efforts, is what Dale was talking about.
Okay. Well, thank you both very much.